Hey everyone, welcome back. Our next guest decided to write a collection of stories exploring the lives of Puerto Rican women who have struggled with the idea of love. The book focuses on the various love wars that have been inherited by generations of women that find themselves caught in the crosshairs of romance, expectations, and community. And joining us to tell us more on love war stories, please welcome Dr. Ivelisse Rodriguez. Hello, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being with us. Desde North Carolina, is it?
Yes,
Well, you're quite the traveler, I might say.
I am. I've lived in a lot of places.
And you're just recently teaching in Texas, well, in North Carolina, right? I forgot
Right,
to
yeah.
mention that you're also a professor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in case everyone's wondering, she's a doctor with a PhD in English creative writing. So she's all about writing. And I also want to mention that the Love War Stories was a 2019 Penn Faulkner Award for fiction finalists, right? And
Yeah.
so that's a big deal because from what I understand, it's been 40 years since a Latina or a Latinx writer, we'll say, has been recognized by Penn.
Well, specifically Puerto Rican. I think there's one other Latinx writer who won the award, but it has a long, illustrious history. But there are definitely a lot of Latinx writers missing from the list.
And so your particular topic of love war stories. Now, unfortunately, I got the book a little late, so I wasn't able to read the entire thing, but I'm really looking forward to completing it. But I got the gist of how there's this, first of all, the way you write is romantic within itself. It's its own, it's almost like it's not poetry. I don't want people to think it's poetry, but it is poetic. The whole thing is like you just kind of like get lost in the concept of what it is that you're sharing as a story, which also goes back to like Puerto Rican heritage. So let's talk about that. And the dynamics between women and men.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the style, I would say it is slightly poetic. One of my inspirations is Sandra Cisneros and the way that she writes and the way that she plays with language. So I owe my poetic sensibility to her. And one of the things that's important for me in terms of writing is, being able to offer the reader lines that they can sort of always carry with them, sort of as bombs on their hearts for their hurt. And so that's why the language of the text is really important to me. And the book itself, one of my main concerns was how detrimental love is to women and how we raise our girls to believe in love and set that up as a pinnacle that they need to reach. And so I was trying to imagine a different world. What if we taught our girls that respect was more important, or courtesy, or kindness, etc. And so in the book, what we see is that the girls are in love, or the young women are in love, and then it ultimately ends up in a tragic way because they end up accepting behavior that's unacceptable because they're worshiping at this altar of love. And so I hope that, any young woman that reads this, any older woman who reads this will take from the book that perhaps we should approach love in a different way, and that maybe it isn't the best thing that we need to sort of base our identity on.
So while I have not completed the book, I was able to dive a little bit into Lola's story. And what I got from reading that, there's this one particular line that you referenced hers, almost being, not necessarily her, but men referring to women almost, or I guess in identifying them similar to like a handkerchief, something that you can just kind of toss away. And so what I picked up from that metaphor was this concept of a woman living for a man, and where a man just kind of, women are disposable to men. Mm-hmm. And so that's an eye-opener, though. It's an eye-opener in general, because I think, I mean, I'm going to speak from being a Puerto Rican myself, within our culture, there's this mentality of like the man is, you know, the hunter and the woman is the gardener, and therefore they're the dominant.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting enough, we're very dominant ourselves as women, but yet when it comes to love, there's this need to be validated by a man.
Right.
And so that dance that you do with the younger girl and her observation of Lola and Lola's, and I, you know, obviously you guys have to get the book yourself and understand, but really it's a beautiful story. I mean, and that's just one of what, 8? There's 9 altogether?
9, yes. Mm-hmm.
And so in this these vignettes, what is it that you're really like, what is it that you were able to capture from, I guess, your own upbringing and implement into the storytelling?
Sure. I think one of the things that, you know, always sort of stands out for me is this idea of who women are supposed to be, not just in Puerto Rican culture, but Latinx culture in general. So, you know, I remember when I was getting my PhD, I remember my friend's mother asking me if I had a love life, you know, and I'm like, well, I'm getting a PhD, you know, nobody asked me about my PhD. It's not very sexy, but, you know, so you know, there's this emphasis that women, no matter what they accomplish, they're still meant to have these romantic relationships, or, you know, even engage in traditional behavior. Like I remember one time my mother complaining, saying how I don't cook and clean, you know. I'm like, I can't do everything, you know. And you know, there are worse things I can do in this world. But so there's still that sort of like staple identity that I think women are supposed to subscribe to. And, you know, we can, you know, part of it is a patriarchal society, but also women and perpetuating that culture. We see this being passed on through our mothers. They're the ones that are really shaping who women are supposed to be, and then sort of men reinforce it. And so one of the things with, I think, Puerto Rican culture specifically is this idea that, you know, you're supposed to get married, you're supposed to have a man if you're heterosexual, and that's the assumption, right? But then we also get this counter narrative that men are sucios and they can't be trusted, etc. And so it's a very contradictory message. And I'm not really sure how girls are supposed to sort of make sense of that, because it's sort of like fall in love, but don't trust that person. And so I don't think really that's the healthiest message to be passing on.
That, you know, you're right. And it's quite traumatic, actually, if you think about it. It's kind of like, well, let's just repeat this cycle of trauma. Really,
Right.
right? It's like, what? But this is what's supposed to do. This is what society expects of you. And
Right.
so, hence the validation. The validation of what, though? The validation of identifying as a woman because you feel you're meant to be completed by having a man and or a companion, right? And serving someone, right? And being there, half of a pair.
Right.
And so,
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
and so before we go, I want people to understand everything that we've been talking about, because aside from the style in which you wrote the story, and aside from the topics that you've chosen to really embark on with regards to just kind of like shifting perspective, do you think that in this awakening that women are kind of becoming more dominant?
Well, the thing is, it's, again, we've always gotten this message that, you know, that women are the second, like the weaker sex or the second sex. But, you know, I think with working class and women of color, I don't really think that's been the case, in the sense that, you know, a lot of us have been just raised by women, and women are the ones out there fighting and doing for their kids, and, you know, they're the ones who are passing on culture. And so I think where we get stuck is with this idea of love, but in so many other ways, I feel like women of color are just very strong and sort of know how to survive.
Right. And so it's just a matter of reprogramming that definition of love.
Right.
Take it
Hmm.
from take it from Dr. Ivelisse Rodriguez. Thank you for being with us today. And you guys, if you are interested in getting her book, A Love War Stories, it's available at bookshop.org. And for more on Ivelisse Rodriguez, you can visit IvelisseRodriguez.com. All right, we have to take a quick break, but when we return, you're going to find out what's in store for this year's Dance Parade. Don't go anywhere.